He opened the alabaster box. The light that came out was not like any light I had ever seen. White the way silence is white. Total, sourceless, filling everything without illuminating anything. And then I felt it. Cold fingers moving through the structure of my thoughts, finding every decision I had made, and leaving everything I hadn't decided yet, entirely alone. Behind me, she made a sound I had never heard from her. Short, involuntary, like something being struck. I glanced back, both hands pressed to her face, the serpents thrashing in blind distress. The eye of her own sister turned against her like a weapon. The plan was gone. She was blind. The man on horseback could see every move I had committed to. I was standing in open ground against 30 Imperial guards and a general who was looking 2 steps ahead of every step I could make. I had nothing left, except the one thing I hadn't decided yet. I dropped the knife. The general blinked. A half-second of genuine hesitation, because an unarmed man walking toward him was not a tactic his stolen foresight had prepared him to read. In that half-second, I closed the last 10 paces at full speed. What followed was not elegant. 2 soldiers in the dirt. No gods, no monsters, no I. Just the arithmetic of bodies and who wanted it more. He got a forearm across my throat. I got both hands on the chain at his neck. Stopped pulling, pushed, drove the box into his jaw with the chain's own force. His grip broke. I rolled clear. The light cut off the moment I closed my fist around the alabaster. The silence that followed had weight. The particular weight of something that has been happening for a long time and has just stopped. Behind me, I heard her exhale. You don't know yet who I am. You don't know what she is. The thing behind me whose presence carries the cold of a sealed tomb and the weight of something that has been alive too long in a place with no exits. You don't know who the man on horseback is, why he came knowing what waited for him, or what is in that alabaster box that lets a warlord see tomorrow before it arrives. You don't know what the humming is, the sound beneath everything in this forest, what makes it, what is still inside it that was recently something else entirely. You don't know what I traded to get here, or the boy of 17 who died looking at my face. You don't know why I dropped the knife. You are about to find out all of it, from the very beginning. My name is Nicias of Corinth. I was a strategos once. I gave an order I have not stopped paying for, and one night I walked into a cursed forest to die, and walked out as something I don't have a word for yet. This is how it happened. The thing they don't tell you about survival is that it has a cost they never put on the invoice. You pay it later, in the dark, in the silence between one breath and the next, when the part of you that remembers what you traded away comes looking for what's owed. I was taken at Thermopylae's second line, not the one the poets sing about, the one with Leonidas and his 300 and their beautiful, useless deaths. The second line, the one that was supposed to hold while the 300 bought us time. I gave the order to fall back. It was the right call. The flank had collapsed. Holding would have bought nothing but a longer casualty list. I have told myself this every day for 2 years in a Persian cell in the depths of Paphlagonia, and every day it has been true, and every day it has felt like a lie. 41 men followed that order. 40 of them were captured alongside me. One of them, a boy of 17 from the Corinthian docks named Erasmus, who had only joined the army to pay his father's debts, died of his wounds 3 months into captivity. He died looking at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The Persians kept me alive because commanders have value. They wanted names, positions, supply routes. I gave them nothing. This was not heroism. It was stubbornness. the same stubbornness that made me give the order to fall back rather than die gloriously in the wrong place. I endured what they did to me in the space between those two stubbornnesses, and I tried not to think about Erasmus. The night I escaped, a drunken guard got too close. I broke his neck with the chains, took his keys and his clothes, fought my way through the camp in silence, and disappeared into the mountains with a rusty knife and a wound in my side that was slowly winning the argument. Behind me, Persian torches multiplied like furious stars. Their war cries tore the night air open. I ran until my legs were fire, and my breath was something rawer than air. The wound in my side soaked through the stolen cloth, leaving a trail any tracker could read. The border with Greek lands was days away. I knew I wasn't going to make it. The same cold, useless clarity I had known when the flank collapsed. I kept running anyway. At dawn, I entered a forest that smelled like grief. Not decay, something older. Something that had been grief long enough to become a kind of climate, a permanent weather system of loss. The trees rose twisted as deformed giants standing watch over intruders, their bark the color of old bruises. Moss-covered stones squatted between the roots like forgotten altars. No birds, no insects, not even wind. The air was perfectly still, cool as the inside of a tomb. I didn't turn back. I collapsed beside a stream of black water that tasted of iron and something faintly sweet, like overripe figs, which made no sense. I washed my wounds and fell against the only olive tree in the forest, its presence as strange and misplaced as a warm room in a cold house. The silence was total. And then, beneath the silence, I heard something I could not account for. A sound like stone shifting against stone, rhythmic, almost breathing. Not one source, but many. A low collective resonance, like a choir humming with their mouths closed. Then a whisper, precise and directed, rising from the air itself. Nicias of Corinth, at last. You have come. A greenish mist formed above the stream, moving with deliberate purpose against the stillness. I pressed my back against the olive tree. The mist condensed, first a face of impossible beauty, pale skin carrying a faint luminous tint, full lips and eyes with vertical pupils the deep amber of old honey. Then her hair, which was not hair, living serpents, each one watching me with cold intelligence, tasting the air between us. Medusa, the Gorgon, the creature that Perseus killed and the gods refused to let die entirely, condemned instead to this forest, to that sound of stone breathing in the dark, to an immortality that was less a gift than a sentence. I fixed my eyes on her reflection in the black water. I was not ready to die. "Open them," she said. "Look at me, Nicias. I won't turn you to stone today." I looked. She floated above the water, her arms bearing scattered scales that shimmered like submerged emeralds. "You are dying. The blade that found your side was coated. You have perhaps until midday before the poison takes your legs." Terror worked through me like a second cold, but something older than fear steadied my voice. "Then say what you came to say," I answered. A Strategos's voice. I had almost forgotten I still owned it. Something shifted in her expression, the faintest flicker of surprise, gone as quickly as it arrived. "Most men beg." "Most men haven't had 2 years to practice not begging." She descended and stood across the stream, her gaze moving over me the way a physician examines a wound they're deciding whether to bother with, measuring unsentimental, looking for what was still salvageable beneath the damage. "You were at Thermopylae's second line," she said. "You gave the order to retreat." I said nothing. There was nothing to say that wasn't either a defense or an admission, and I was too tired for either. "The 40 men who followed you are still alive," she said, "except one." The stone choir in the deeper forest swelled once, then receded like a tide. "I have been watching you for longer than you know, Nicias. The question is whether you are what I think you are, or simply what you think you are. Every civilization that ever existed told stories in the dark, not to entertain, to survive. This is one of those stories. If you are new here, welcome to Folktale Monarchy. Subscribe to the channel and never face the dark without a story again." She healed me, not gently. Her serpents drew the poison out through what felt like ice, dragged backward through my blood. The scar it left was silver at the edges. My vision sharpened until I could count the individual scales on the nearest serpent's body from 3 paces away. She led me deeper into the forest, where the stone choir grew louder, and where I finally understood what it was. "The ones I have turned are not dead," she said. "They hear, they remember. They have simply lost all means of expression except this sound. Every man you lure into this forest tonight will join it. That is the weight of what I'm asking you to carry." She said it without cruelty. That was precisely what made it land. In a clearing lit by pale moonlight, 3 Persian soldiers stood frozen mid-stride. Stone, perfect stone, their faces locked in the first moment of understanding. She told me their commander was Artabanus, the Burner of Delphi. The man who had torched Apollo's oracle methodically, beginning at dawn and finishing at dusk, killing the priests last. He was marching west, toward Corinth, toward Athens, toward everything still standing. 3 years ago, he stole the eye of the Grey, my sister's eye, the one that sees what will be, not what is. Every Persian victory since has been won with stolen foresight. That is why Greece is losing, not because their soldiers are better, because their general is cheating against time itself. "And if the eye is returned?" I asked. "Without it, Artabanus is merely an excellent general. Greece has beaten those before." I stood and looked toward the dark border of trees. "I'll draw his vanguard into this forest, wave by wave," I said. "He'll escalate until he comes himself, but there is one problem. The moment he opens the eye, he'll see the entire plan." "Yes," she said. "So we don't trick him. We show him exactly what we're doing, so obviously that the eye confirms it. Then I change one thing I haven't decided yet. Something the eye can't show him because it doesn't exist yet when he looks." Recognition crossed her face. Not surprise, but something older and more deliberate, as if she had been waiting to see if I would arrive at this on my own. "If I do this, I walk out of here free." "Your word," I said. "You have my word." "One more thing. The men we turned to stone, can it be undone?" "No," she said. "Then understand that I will carry them, the same way I carry the others." "Don't tell me that's unnecessary." "Because it isn't." The serpent settled slowly, one by one. "You are not what I expected," she said at last. "What did you expect?" "Perseus." The way she said it made clear it was not a compliment to either of us. She gestured to the ground at the edge of the clearing. In the soft earth, the ancient roots had formed shapes, pathways, distances, contours. A map. She had been planning this before tonight, possibly before the war. A Gorgon and a disgraced Strategos crouched over a map made of roots, in a forest full of voices that would never stop. The gods had a savage sense of humor, but for the first time in longer than I could properly remember. I felt something other than the weight of Erasmus's last look. The pre-dawn was the color of a bruise when I stepped out of the forest. I moved into the open ground deliberately, visible, unhurried, performing weakness with the same care an actor performs grief. One hand pressed to my side, the other dragging the rusty knife through the wet grass, leaving a trail a blind man could follow. I counted to 50 before I heard the shout. 4 riders. I broke into a desperate lurching run, just slow enough to look catchable, and crossed into the dark with 10 strides to spare. The riders slowed at the border of the trees. I heard the nearest horse snort and refuse. The riders dismounted and followed on foot. Disciplined men, brave enough to advance into something that had frightened their horses because their orders required it. They deserved better than what the forest gave them. I stopped behind a wide trunk and waited. The screaming came 30 seconds later. Then, absolute silence. I walked back. 4 new shapes stood in the pale dark, their faces still carrying the shape of the moment when they had understood. I did not let myself look long enough to read their features. I had promised myself that much. 2 more waves followed. 12 men, then 18. 50 statues in the clearing by the time the camp's horns sounded, and I knew what was coming next. Between the waves, Medusa stood beside me in the dark. "Erasmus," she said quietly. "He didn't blame you at the end. He was looking at you because you were the last familiar thing, not because he held you responsible." "You don't know that," I said. "No, but neither do you. And you've been carrying the worse interpretation for 2 years when either one was equally possible." This was the exchange I had no answer for. I stood in a forest full of petrified voices and said nothing for a long time. Then I turned toward the tree line. "I'll go get the next wave," I said. He came on the 3rd wave, and he came prepared. 30 men in black lacquered armor flanked him. The alabaster box at his chest pulsed with cold light, and when I looked at it from 200 paces, something inside looked back. He halted at the forest's edge, scanned the trees slowly, then looked directly at where I was standing in the dark, invisible by any natural means. He looked directly at me. He knew. The eye had shown him everything. My blood went cold with the specific chill of a plan that has just broken open. "He's seen it," Medusa breathed beside me. "The eye shows decisions, not possibilities. He's seen what I decided, not what I haven't decided yet." I held on to that like a rope over a drop. Then I stepped out from the trees, upright, the knife held properly, telling him with my whole body, "This is not panic, this is a choice." "You burned Delphi," I said. "I did," he answered, without apology and without pleasure, the way a man confirms a fact about the weather. The oracle served gods who never kept a single promise to humanity, gods who demanded blood and obedience, and delivered nothing except more demands. The priests of Delphi were their debt collectors. He paused. "You prayed to those gods, Nicias, and they let you rot in my prison for 2 years. They let your boy Erasmus die looking at your face. Tell me, what exactly did the gods give you in return for your faith?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Full of the cell, full of the 2 years, full of a correct decision that had cost everything anyway. I had no good answer, and Artabanus could see in my face that I didn't, which was worse than any blow he could have struck. "I am not your enemy," he said. "I am trying to end the age of gods before the age of gods ends everything else. The world I am building does not require human beings to bleed for beings who do not bleed for them." He opened the alabaster box. White light, cold fingers moving through my thoughts. Behind me, that short, involuntary sound from her, like something being struck. Both hands to her face, the serpent's thrashing. The plan was gone. She was blind. I was standing in open ground with nothing, except the one thing I hadn't decided yet. I dropped the knife. The general blinked. Half a second of genuine hesitation, because the eye could not have shown him this. I closed the last 10 paces at the full speed I hadn't used yet. 2 soldiers in the dirt. No gods, no monsters, no I. Just bodies and the brutal arithmetic of who wanted it more. He got a forearm across my throat. I got both hands on the chain at his neck, stopped pulling, pushed, drove the box into his jaw with the chain's own force. His grip broke. I rolled clear. The light cut off the moment I closed my fist around the alabaster. Medusa recovered the instant the light went out. Half the remaining guard had open eyes. They were stone. The other half dropped their weapons. "Tell them to take him and go," I said. "He burned Delphi. He used my sister's eye against me. He's beaten. One arm broken, his legion gone, his advantage gone. Let him go home and build his godless world from what's left of him. A man who is partly right is more useful alive than another stone voice in your forest." A long silence. Then she spoke in the language older than both of us, and the remaining soldiers lifted their commander and backed away without opening their eyes until the forest released them into the gray morning beyond. I held out the alabaster box. She took it with both hands. Careful, tender. Not the grip of a predator reclaiming property, but the touch of someone returning something to a wound it had been taken from. She pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes. A long moment passed. Then, from somewhere I could not locate, not in this forest, not in this world exactly, but close, 3 voices unclenched after a long silence. The stone choir shifted pitch, just slightly, just enough to notice. Her sisters, seeing again for the first time in 3 years, something very old and very broken had, in that moment, been partially set right. Dawn had fully broken by the time we returned to her clearing. I looked at her, really looked, for the last time. I had spent the night trying to resolve the contradiction of her and had arrived at the conclusion that she was not a contradiction at all. She was simply someone who had been changed past a certain point by things done to her and had survived, and was neither better nor worse for it, only different. Honest about the difference in a way that most people who had been broken and rebuilt were not. "What were you actually testing for?" I asked. "The deal, the healing, telling me what the statues could still hear. What were you looking for the whole night?" "Whether someone carrying Perseus's bloodline could choose to be something other than what Perseus was," she said. "He came into this forest with a mission and a sword. He completed the mission and he left. He never asked what I could hear. He never asked what I had done to survive. He saw a monster and he ended it and called that heroism." A pause. I wanted to know if the blood had changed, if it was possible for it to change. "And," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The serpents were completely still. "It has," she said at last. "Walk north, Nicias. The stream will show you the way." I walked. The stone choir hummed at the same pitch as always, but now I moved through it the way you walk through a room full of sleeping people. Carefully, trying not to add to the weight of the place. Where the stream turned silver, I turned east. The trees thinned. The silence broke. First 1 bird, then 3. Then the full disorganized riot of a living world pouring back in all at once. The air changed from tomb cool to something with soil in it. Something alive and ordinary and almost unbearably welcome. I breathed it in and held it. The silver scar on my side caught the morning light. My eyes, in my reflection in the stream, held their faint gold. I was not the man who had stumbled out of Paphlagonia bleeding and hunted and carrying an invoice with no end. I was something altered, changed past a certain point, neither better nor worse for it, only different. The same description she had used for herself. I had only just heard it applied to me, and it fit. I thought about Erasmus then, not the look on his face as he died. For the first time in 2 years, not that, but the boy himself, 17 years old. Joined the army to pay a debt, followed an order because the order was right. He had looked at me at the end, not with accusation but with recognition, because I was the last familiar face in an unfamiliar place. I had been carrying the wrong version of that story for 2 years. I set it down, not forgotten, not erased, simply set down. The way you set down a weight you have carried past the point where carrying it serves any purpose. He deserved to be remembered without the weight on top of him. I kept walking. The road to Thessaly appeared through the thinning trees, wide, ordinary, pointing east. I stepped onto it. Somewhere behind me, Artabanus was being carried back to his camp with a broken arm and a story his emperor would receive with profound skepticism. Without the eye, the Persian campaign would grind on. Wars do not end because one general loses, but they would grind on equally now. No more foresight, no more watching tomorrow before it arrived. Greece would fight the rest of this war on equal terms, which is all any soldier can honestly ask for. And somewhere in the forest behind me, a Gorgon who had been a prisoner of gods and memory and her own terrible power for longer than most civilizations had existed was standing in her clearing, holding her sister's sight, listening to the stone choir change its pitch. Finally, at something close to peace. The transaction was complete. All accounts settled. Nothing owed in either direction. It was enough. I was a strategos of Corinth, former prisoner, altered beyond what I had been, but not beyond what I recognized as myself. Walking east into a morning that smelled like soil and ordinary things and the specific quiet that follows when something that needed to happen has finally happened. I did not look back. The thing they don't tell you about survival is that it has a cost they never put on the invoice. But they also don't tell you this. Sometimes, if you survive long enough and stubbornly enough, you reach the morning where the invoice is paid. I reached that morning. I walked into it. And for the first time in longer than I could properly measure, I walked without the weight. Every great story deserves to be heard. Every great listener deserves another story. If this one stayed with you, if Nicias, Medusa, or even Artabanus left something in your chest that wasn't there before, then you already know what kind of channel this is. Subscribe to Folktale Monarchy. The stories are waiting, and so are we.